Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Tucker Carlson Today here on Fox Nation. We're grateful to be doing this, grateful to have more time, grateful to be outside the normal limits of 5-minute segments and get more deeply into the subjects that are completely changing the world and of interest to you and to us. We had a broad range of possibilities for the first person to talk to as we begin this new show, this new series. But really, in the end, there was only one choice. The one person we know who has crystal clarity on what's happening, not just in this country, but in the world, someone who's watched it and chronicled it for years now. His name is Douglas Murray. He's a Brit. He's the associate editor of The Spectator in London. He's the author of the fantastic book, The Madness of Crowds, Gender, Race, and Identity. And we are really pleased to have Douglas Murray join us here on the set. Douglas, thanks so much for doing this. It's a great pleasure. So there are a million places to start. There are so many things happening. I want to look a little more deeply into one story, into several facets of a story in the news today, because I think it might tell us what's happening more broadly. And it's a story of a woman called Amanda Gorman, who is a poet. She's 23. When she was 22, she gave the inaugural poem at President Biden's inauguration. The key thing to know about Amanda Gorman is that she is the representative of an oppressed group. That is the way we are introduced to her in every profile. Amanda Gorman, in addition to being called Amanda, is the product of the most expensive private school in Los Angeles, $42,000 a year for 13 years, Harvard College for 4 years, a semester abroad in Spain, all paid for by others, no student debt. In what sense is she oppressed?
Well, obviously the age we live in has a strange value system. Many of us grew up in societies where we admired people who were brave or heroic, who strove to show people the way to be brave in their lives. In our own lifetimes, this has changed. Now, if you want to be a leader, you have to show that you are an oppressed minority. You have to show suffering. You have to show beleaguerment, that everything's been done against you. People are meant to not admire heroism, but to admire suffering. And so we have created a suffering Olympics, where even very, very privileged people wish people not to recognize their privilege, but rather to think of them as being downtrodden. And this is just this era's passport to elite success.
It does seem like sometimes the most privileged spend the most time telling us that they're oppressed. And I guess that's what's so bewildering as you watch this.
Yes, and of course it's an impossible game, because we could point out that this is nonsense. We could just say, I don't recognize your right to claim victimhood. You seem not to me to be a victim. But then there are clever little things you can do as a part of that. You can say, you can say back to that, well, I'm part of X oppressed group. So even though I might have been lucky in my life, I'm part of a group that can give me the passport to elite success by being oppressed. There are other ones like this. People can say, oh, I've got mental health, as if everybody else doesn't have any mental health issues. You can do various things like this, but the point is to show yourself to be the most oppressed person so that you win. And then you can tell everyone else what to do. And Amanda Gorman has this, to an extraordinary extent. It's almost as if the whole thing of her doing this alleged poem, just a list of banalities really at the inauguration, was almost just, I dare you to criticize this work. There were people who criticized the poem who immediately were lambasted for criticizing it. How dare you criticize the poem? Amanda Gorman, by any normal measure, has, as you pointed out, had a much luckier life than almost anybody in America. But if you point out that even you don't like the poem, it doesn't seem to rhyme, doesn't seem to scan, doesn't seem to be memorable, you're doing that against somebody you're not meant to criticize, because the person you're criticizing can claim oppression. This is an irreducible game. I mean, we could all play it. It's just that I think decent people wouldn't and shouldn't.
What does it do to art? I mean, if you care about, I actually like poetry, and I think it's interesting, it's important, it's difficult to write. If you tell a population this is beauty, this is art, when it's so obviously not, what does that do to art?
Well, our age has decided that beauty isn't very important. It's decided that political banality is of utmost importance. that your life will find meaning if you demonstrate and wave placards and much more. I think this is a horrible view of life. It's a radical left view of life that thinks that you'll find meaning by protesting and yelling. These people forget that actually I think nobody on their deathbeds looks back at their life and thinks, I wish I'd attended that protest. I wish I'd made more placards. Wouldn't it have been good? No, most people on their deathbeds regret they didn't spend more time with loved ones.
Yes.
So the whole sense of what's important in our society has changed radically and in an ugly direction. It makes everything political. It wants to politicize everything. It wants to politicize art. It wants to politicize poetry. All of the things that were meaningful in our lives have been picked up and spun through this cycle of politics. And it's boring, it's ugly, and I think that it's the job of any sensible person to say, I refute this. I refuse to join in this game. I refuse to have this vision of life. I have a better vision of life and how it should be lived, and we should assert that.
You know, Douglas Murray makes a strong, strong point. I tell this to my kids every single time. I say, kids, everything is looked through the lens of being political and being politicized. And they go, oh, Dad, come on. You're always saying that. Everything isn't political. And I'm telling them, guys, everything you do is looked through a political lens. Everything you see on social media, everything they're taught to at university and colleges, everything that's coming from the mainstream media, everything that's coming from the alphabet networks. Everything is political. Movies are political. Songs are political. Poetry is, like I was saying, political. The Olympics are political. Sports have become political. Everything is political. Guns are political. Eating is political. Drinking is political. You name it, everything is political. And this girl, Amanda Gorman, she has been one of the most privileged people in the United States of America. First of all, there's no such thing as, they say, white privilege, white privilege. So does that mean everybody in India has basically brown privilege? Is that brown privilege? What about this side? Is this white privilege? So when I show my hands are white, I have white privilege. When I show this, I've got brown privilege. If I show other areas of my body that are really nice and white because they're not tanned yet, that's white privilege. I'm just asking, folks. But because someone's black, nobody talks about black privilege. Nobody talks about Asian privilege. Nobody. But Amanda Gorman was just, if they really wanted to showcase somebody, why didn't they pick somebody from sub-Saharan Africa? Why didn't they pick somebody from some downtrodden place on God's green earth, around the planet somewhere, find somebody who was an exceptional student and was writing poetry somewhere, or have a contest around the world, fly that person over the United States, have them there at the inauguration, then you can say to somebody, take a look, this person had nothing, was growing up in the deserts of Africa, but somehow had the God-given talent to be able to write a beautiful poem. Amanda's poem, come on, okay? It doesn't rhyme, it no skill level set. Any 5th or 6th grader could have written it. Anybody. You don't need to be, of a higher intellect to understand her poem. It's just a laundry list of everything that's out there that people on the left and liberals want. That's all that is. She just got plucked out there. And like I said, she's got black privilege. That's what she has. She has tons of black privilege. She's an affirmative action hire at her school and at Harvard. She didn't deserve to be at Harvard. She got in because of the color of her skin. That's why she was black. That's why they picked her. Exactly. That's going to be forever tainting her. She is an affirmative action student hire at an elite school, and we don't know how we have no idea. But I could bet my bottom dollar that she was put in the top because she was black. Anyways, folks, this is what we have on tap for you today. We're going to get back with more with Douglas and Tucker Carlson. You're watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasir, where I give you my political prescription from my political perspective. What happens when all these things collide? Amanda Gorman, Tucker Carlson, Douglas Murray, politicizing everything, social media, religion, culture, politics, government, they all come crashing together. Let's get back to more of the interview right now.
Into that in much greater detail, but I want to ask you one last question about this Amanda Gorman story. And by the way, I'm not attacking Amanda Gorman, whom I don't know, and I always admire young people who are successful, almost no matter what they do. However, there was a story in the New York Times yesterday about a new controversy surrounding her work, and it's this. Foreign publishers, her poem is apparently about to drop 150,000 copies, I think by Viking, and it is being translated into other languages, Dutch among them. And the Dutch publisher hired a Dutch translator to translate the poem into Dutch, but the Dutch translator was white and was fired for that. Only a black person can translate a black person's poem.
Yes.
What does that tell you about where we're going?
I think also, didn't the Dutch translator, they were thought to be perfect for the job because the Dutch translator is a they-them person.
Right.
Had come out as non-binary or look at me, as I say. The translator had come out as they-them, and so therefore should be perfect to do the translation, except that then it turned out that the translator was white. Now, if that's the road we're heading down, this is a dark, dark road. You can play racial equality, but the only alternative is racial supremacy. Racial supremacy runs if you believe that one group actually ruins things by even being. And this current form of racial supremacy that's running rife across America asserts not just that black people and white people are equal, it now says, it's now moved to the next stage, which is to say, actually, white people spoil everything. They wreck things. They can't even be a translator in Dutch of a black person's poem because they will ruin it. Now, there are several problems about this. One is it's just flat out racist. Another is that it pretends that there is experience that cannot be understood across racial group lines. As if a white person, by the way, there's nothing particularly complex about Amanda Gorman's poem. I mean, it's not as if there are sort of subtleties about it that need to be teased out. Most of it could be translated by a high school student who was proficient in a couple of languages. No, what this says is that the thought of a black writer is of a kind that a white translator couldn't appreciate. Well, in that case, white people and black people can't understand each other. And where do you think that will go? You know, this is the darkest road, and we are being led along it by people who pretend to be anti-racists. And they're not. They're racists. They're racists. They happen to have come along this time under the guise of anti-racism, but they're racists. If they think that white people and black people cannot understand each other and we cannot speak across boundaries, then there's nothing left but war, hatred, oppression, bigotry, and much more. And I think that anyone, black, white, any other color, should say, no, we're not doing that. We're sitting this one out. In fact, we're going to do more than sit this one out. We're going to fight back at that. We're not going to play that game. We know where it leads, even if you don't. So I very much hope that people realize what these so-called anti-racists are doing, the walls that they're building, the divisions that they are embedding and forcing on a new generation of Americans. And I hope that more and more Americans just step away from that, opt out of it, and call it out.
How do you do that?
Everyone can do it in their own lives. My experience is that people shouldn't expect the cavalry to come to save them. I think the discovery of middle age, apart from anything else, is that the cavalry is you.
Folks, this just gets more ridiculous and more ridiculous and more ridiculous as this goes on. Now you can't have a white person translating a black person's poetry or a black person's writing. And this is happening in the Netherlands. How many black people do you think there are? Black Dutch people are there? I would say very, very few. That country is probably 97, 98, 99% white European, white Dutch. So if you get a black translator to translate a black person's poem, how will the white people understand that poem if we take this logic out to its further stupidity, its further moronicity, its further retardedness, its further idiocy? You see where I'm going with this? And then, like Douglas pointed out, you've got people that are basically saying they're anti-racist. They're not anti-racist, like Antifa. They're not anti-fascist. They are fascists. They just put the word anti in there thinking that they're going to fool anybody with this linguistic lingo that the left comes up with. They're very good at the linguistics. They are very, very good at emoting a response. But Ibram X. Kendi, who culturally appropriated the name X. Kendi when he was born Henry Rogers, Ibram Henry Rogers, but he decided wasn't doing a thing. Nothing of no note whatsoever, insignificant, inconsequential. That's where he was, floundering around. Changes his name. Obviously, people go, ooh, Ibram X. Kendi, there's somebody that we need to talk to. He's talking about race. He's a race hater, a race traitor, a race baiter, a race hustler. Everything through the prism now that if it was racism in the past, it has to be racism forward. An affirmative action hire. He's black. Of course he is. And this is what's going on right now. This is the dark road that we're being led on. Dare we say the dark black road that we're going on. A lot of comments in the section for that one there. But that's just the way it is, folks. Everything is being politicized. Amanda Gorman has she is so privileged, black privilege, had her score adjusted so she could get into Harvard because Chinese students and Asian students and other Indian students and other students from Asia, guess what? Had their scores knocked down. Hers were up higher so that she could be able to attend a school that she had no business attending other than because of her skin color. That's not the way it should be. Barack Obama's children, don't you think they've got tons and tons and tons of privilege over any kind of ethnic privilege, any kind of color privilege, any kind of heritage privilege, any kind of DNA privilege? Of course they do. There's always going to be people that have more privilege. Someone born to a billionaire's family has got more privilege with money and status and whatever than someone born into a middle class or lower middle class family. We're lucky you're born in the United States, if you're born in the United States of America, than in sub-Saharan Africa. There's privilege all abound. All over the world, there's privilege. You start slicing and dicing intersectionality like the Democrats and leftists and liberals do, that's where the problem starts to step in. Anyways, folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host. My name is Dr. Nasir. If you've done so already, we'd love for you to subscribe to the channel, like, share, and follow us. You all know what to do. Check out our video links above and below. And I'll leave you with my final thought, which is, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.